And we are live. Yep, I think this is working now. Thanks everyone for attending, for joining our first virtual event. So let's see how this goes. We have a great presentation today. So some housekeeping first. This is our first event. So please be patient in case of any technical difficulties. Hopefully the streaming will go well. There's a slight delay when doing live streaming, so we might have like a 20-second delay between what is happening in real time. So keep that in mind when you're sending questions. So feel free to send your questions during the event, during the talk, on using the live chat on YouTube, and we'll get to your questions. So just be patient. It might take a little while for us to respond based on this delay. So we're going to start doing this online now, thanks to COVID, but definitely we're going to try to bring good content. Please, I sent an email, a message in the meetup.com with a link to join our Slack channel, our Slack org. So to keep in touch there and hear your suggestions. And like always, we're looking for sponsors, we're looking for speakers. And if you have any ideas of any suggestions of topics for us to get here, just shoot us a message there. And without further ado, I want to introduce Arturo, our speaker of the day. So I'll hand it over to you, Arturo.
Thank you, Orlando. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us for this first virtual event. I'm very excited. My name is Arturo Parra, and I'm going to be giving a presentation on MicroProfile. You know, a few months ago, I heard for the first time about MicroProfile, and I wanted to learn more about what it is, how it is used, and how it compares with competing technologies, so to speak. And also, I wanted to share all my learnings with the community, which is what we're going to be doing tonight. So let's get right into it. Okay, first of all, a little disclaimer. Whatever you'll be learning here this night on MicroProfile, you are learning it from a beginner, which is me. I've been working with this not in real projects. I just started playing with it, reading about it in books, and I put together some presentation to learn and at the same time share it with the community. So bear with me. Okay, my background, my name, as I said, is Arturo Parra. I'm a senior software engineer, and I started my career back in 2003 when everything was so difficult when it came to building software. Very, very rudimentary tools we had back then. I worked with different languages, but then I decided to stay with Java for most of my career because I loved it. And now I work for Premier Inc., which is a company in the healthcare space. And I work inside Premier in the Department of Customer Identity and Access Management, building and maintaining software for the authorization processes that go in all of the applications that we offer at Premier. I also help to organize the Charlotte Java user group, and you can contact me or reach out to me in Twitter at Arcturus, or if you just want to send me an email with questions or engage in a conversation about technologies, I'm always open for that. Okay, so the agenda, what we're going to be covering tonight is what is MicroProfile, the definition of MicroProfile, the history of Java Enterprise Edition and how it relates to MicroProfile, how is MicroProfile any different from JEE or Jakarta EE, as we have heard about these terms? And then who owns MicroProfile, if anybody in particular? Then we're going to look at various implementations of MicroProfile, which vendors provide servers that implement or libraries that implement the MicroProfile specifications. And then at the end, I'm going to give a demo on MicroProfile. I'll be showing a few features that MicroProfile has. Okay, let's get started. What is MicroProfile? It's a set of specifications for enterprise Java applications. And notice here the word specifications in plural, because there are several specifications that are defined within this framework. And the framework itself, it's only a standard that defines what needs to happen for those vendors who want to provide these services and implement these services. So it's not technology per se, it's a set of specifications that vendors need to implement. And then it targets microservices that will run in the cloud natively. That is, you will build applications based on MicroProfile implementations that will have all those features that the cloud contains nowadays, like health checks, REST services, and fault tolerance and things like that. And then it overlaps, MicroProfile overlaps with Jakarta EE on 4 particular specifications. Those are CDI, JAX-RS, JAX-P, and JAX-B, as we will see later on. Okay, so what about JEE? Well, we know that it's now very, very mature technology, and it's very old, relatively speaking. It was born in 1999, and at the beginning, it only offered very basic web container capabilities. Now, throughout the years, it ended up consisting of a total of 35 specifications, like the servlet specification, EJBs, JSPs, and so on and so forth. Now, all of the compliant platform vendors were required to implement them all to be considered JEE implementations. So the 35 of them needed to be implemented. If not, then they wouldn't be considered application servers for JEE. Like, for example, Tomcat was only considered, or is still only considered a servlet container because it does not implement all of the specifications that come with JEE. And it was governed by the Java community process, and it was supposed to be an open community where anybody could contribute to it. But at the end of the day, the only one making the call on anything, on any decision that needed to happen within the specification was made at first by Sun Microsystems and then by Oracle. So it wasn't, in practice, it wasn't that open. And then let's look at the Java EE timeline. This is something I call the story of stagnation. The first version, as we saw, came in 1999, but then every version after that was taking more and more time to be defined. We can see the first versions took about 1.5 years to complete and to be released. By Java EE5, which is when they got rid of that number 2 in the J2EE name. It still amazes me that people call it J2EE. It took 30 months, and then by the end, Java EE8, which was the last Java EE specification, took a staggering 52 months, which is almost 5.5 years. So no wonder why everybody needed something new. And but businesses don't stop, right? So the digital economy happened. The cloud was rising more and more. We had Docker and containers. We had different architectural styles like microservices and things like that. And obviously, businesses needed something that was capable of filling those gaps, right? Because JEE at the time didn't provide those features. So what the Java community came up with is frameworks that would fill in the gaps that were present in JEE. But these frameworks obviously are external to the actual platform. And because the platform itself wouldn't evolve as quickly as needed, these libraries or frameworks started popping up, and we probably know all of them, or most of them, like Struts, Spring, even platforms that are not Java-based, like Node.js based in JavaScript, and many others, right? And those frameworks helped a lot in this process. Now, the Java community is still worldwide, and many CIOs and CTOs in many companies, they wanted an open standard. Not only a framework that was external to a specification like JEE, they wanted an actual specification that was open standard and in which everybody was going to be able to contribute. So that's how MicroProfile was born. It was first announced in June in 2016. And then version 1 was released the same year in September. And the goal of MicroProfile was to work on microservice patterns and with integration with the cloud, also known as cloud native, and also patterns like health checks and metrics. And the first version started reusing 3 of the existing specifications from JEE, and those were CDI, context dependency injection, JAX-RS for REST services, and JSON-P for JSON processing. And then later on, MicroProfile defined this extra specification, JSON-V, not JSON-P, which was based on JSON-P, but it was to improve the development experience, the developer experience when building microservices and processing JSON. So finally, Oracle gives up, and they move the JEE specification and the stewardship to the Eclipse Foundation in 2017. This was a great move because now we all know the Eclipse Foundation is really open, and many contributors from individuals, companies, vendors, everybody is able to participate in defining whatever standards the Eclipse Foundation is steward of. And now we have JEE as one of the specifications, not owned, but stewarded by the Eclipse Foundation. But it needed to be rebranded as Jakarta EE, and that's why we now have that name, Jakarta EE. Jakarta EE 8 was released in September 2019, which is just last year. It took a long time because Oracle had processes very, very onerous, and they also wanted to get everything right, licensing and all those kind of stuff. So Jakarta EE 8 is an exact copy of what you would have in JEE 8, in Java EE 8. And the reason they changed the name is because of licensing. Oracle wouldn't let the Eclipse Foundation reuse the Java name in the platform. But this is the next evolution of Java EE, and we just now call it Jakarta EE. And it is an exact copy right now. The version 9 will be released throughout this year, and the only things that it'll have new they will move all of the JAVAX namespace classes to the Jakarta namespace. And they will have some other few additions like XML binding. Now, how does the Eclipse MicroProfile governance work? It focuses on creating, innovating, and evolving specifications in a collaborative manner. Like they have committer approvals, they have project releases, and more. But this is not a waterfall kind of process. It is a lightweight process that allows multiple teams to work at the same time in different specifications. So that's a very good thing for the specification. And then they have a bi-weekly Hangouts meeting call, which is published to the YouTube channel. And then they also have a MicroProfile Google group. And it is good. I've watched a couple of those meetings they've had, and everybody participates, individuals, Java champions, vendors, and many others. Now, what are the implementations of MicroProfile? We have many of them, but these are, in my opinion, the most important ones. Tommy, Wildfly, Quarkus, and some others like Helidon, OpenLiberty. So there's many options to choose from. Now, before we continue, I want to clarify some concepts that you may or may not be very familiar with. So application servers, Uber jars, and assemblers. Now, the old setup was we had an application server, JEE or J2EE, and then on top of that, we would build our applications. We would manually extend our classes from servlets, and then implement the do post, do get methods, and all sorts of things. And it was not very, not very good for developer experience. Now on the top right corner, we have a modern stack with frameworks. So we would have application server, a J2E server, or a serverless container like Tomcat, and then on top of that we would have frameworks like Struts or Spring. And then on top of the framework, then we would build our application by using the API provided by the framework. That would make the developer experience a lot better, but we would still be using under the hood all of those specifications from J2EE or JEE. On the bottom left corner, we have the new setup, as it would be with Jakarta EE or MicroProfile, or both, because they can work together very nicely. So we only have 2 layers, like in the beginning, but we now, despite having only 2 layers, the APIs that these platforms provide are so good that developer experience is improved as well. And then we have a very new kind of platform, which are called assemblers. And in that category, we have, for example, Quarkus, and we also have Helidon. Now, we also just have 2 layers, but the bottom layer, the app assembler, only includes those libraries that are really needed for your application. So when you bundle your application, you will end up with a very lightweight deliverable, because obviously you're not including things that you don't need. Okay, so it's demo time. In this demo, we're going to be showing a few features from MicroProfile. The first thing we have to do is go to the starter in start.microprofile.io. For those who are familiar with Spring or Spring Boot, you will find this very similar to the Spring Boot starter at start.spring.io. And this is the very first version of a starter for MicroProfile. And it's very simple. All you have to do is choose a group ID, and this information let's say CLT jog. This information is what will live in your POM file when you download the bundle from here. You choose an artifact ID. I'm going to leave demo there. And then you have the option to choose between different MicroProfile version. And then you have the option to select which runtime you'll be building your application on. I'm going to choose Quarkus for this demo. And MicroProfile and the latest version of Quarkus, or at least the version that it's downloaded from this starter, implements MicroProfile 3.2. And then on the bottom right side, you have examples for specifications. If you want to know more or less what implementing JWT authorization or authentication works, then you would select that one. Or you would select all of them and download the artifact and see and have a feel of how they are implemented or how you can use them. Because we are going to build a few of those from scratch, I'm not going to choose anything for now. And then you just click download, and it'll save a zip file into your hard drive. And all we have to do is unzip it. I'm going to put it first in my dev folder. And then I'm going to unzip it, demo. Okay, and as you can see, it's a Maven application. It comes with its POM file, a README file, and then very basic bootstrap classes, and a hello example. All right. So now let's go to our terminal. And then let's go into demo. Since we are using Quarkus for this example, the way we build the application is by using Maven and then the Quarkus profile and the build goal. And it takes a few seconds to build the application. Now, you can notice here, we have a demo runner.jar that was generated, and this was created by Quarkus itself. It took the bare minimum that an application needs, and then it bundled all together in this jar file. To run it, all we have to do is java jar, and then target the name of our jar and hit enter. And boom, it started. We have an application up and running, and it's exposed in the port 8080. And you can see here, the installed features are only CDI and REST Easy. CDI is obviously the implementation of Quarkus for context and dependency injection, and REST Easy is the implementation that Quarkus gives us for JAX-RS, at least a minimized version of that. When we require extra stuff, we can add as we need them. Now, let's go to our browser and then try to hit our port 8080. And we see that we have a very basic HTML with a title and then a link that says hello JAX-RS endpoint. This endpoint is just an example that our bundle came with. So if we click on that, we see the hello world message. So very simple stuff. Now, what comes inside? What comes inside the actual application that we downloaded? Let's look at it. we go to dev, demo, and open up as a project. And the first thing we notice, it opens first the README file, the markdown, with some tips on how we can build the application, run the application. The first two we already saw, and some other tips, right? Then one thing I want you to look at is the POM file. In the POM file, the only dependency we have is Quarkus REST-easy, which is the lightweight implementation of JAX-RS from Quarkus. And then we have 1.3.0 as the version of Quarkus, and that's all the dependencies we have. It also comes with a couple of profiles defined, which we already used, Quarkus, and then the build profile. It also comes with native profile. This is to build your application into native machine code. But that's only possible if you have installed the Graal VM platform. In this demo, we're not going to be building any native code, since our presentation is not about Quarkus, but about MicroProfile. Okay, so it also comes with a couple of Bootstrap classes. The demo REST application, it defines a scope, application path, and then your context root, which in this case is /data. If you see here, when we clicked on the hello world, it went to /data/hello. If you wanted to, you can remove that. You could remove this data and then just leave /. In that case, to hit your service, you would have to do /hello. And then the hello controller, which is the scaffolding it gave us, it simply implements a class that's singleton of scope, and then it has the path /hello. This path comes after the root context. And then we have a get HTTP verb. This would map directly into the get mapping from Spring. So this is how you implement a get endpoint in your application using MicroProfile. And then here we're just returning the string hello world. Okay, so what if, this is very nice, but what if we wanted to pass in a parameter? Let's say I wanted to pass in my name, and I want this application to tell me hello and then my name. The only thing we do is we specify a path here, and then we give it a name to that parameter that we will receive from the URL. And we are going to catch it in the path param. Name is the variable name we used for that parameter here, so that's why we have to use that one. And then we could easily say string format instead of world. I want to put a variable there, in this case, name. So I save that, and of course, I need to restart my server. I need to rebuild and everything, but Quarkus comes with a very nice feature, which is the development mode, which will observe any changes to your class path. And then if it detects any changes, it'll automatically stop the server, rebuild, and restart the server for you, providing a more fluid process for developers. And to do that, we just do maven clean compile, and then we do Quarkus development mode. Then it takes a few seconds, and we have the application up and running again, but now with the profile dev activated. So live coding is activated. Now, if we go to our browser, we just pass in a name there, and we will see that it received the parameter, and it sent it back with a message, "Hello, Arturo." If I want my whole name, we can do that as well. Okay, so what if we make a mistake? If we make a change, and since it's live coding, what would happen? Let's say I remove this semicolon, and then I save. I go to my browser, refresh, and we see an error, but it's a very nice error. And I didn't have, you noticed, I didn't have to stop the server, rebuild, and restart the server. And then the error is very helpful, the error message, because it tells me exactly what happened, which is taken from the stack trace. So after doing that, okay, let's go and fix it, save it, and go back to our browser, refresh, and we're back in business. Okay, so that's very cool. Now, Quarkus allows us to, as we develop, we can keep on adding more features to our application. So if we wanted to implement REST client to call another service, we can do that. If we wanted to implement the fault tolerance, let's say, we can also keep on adding libraries. Now, let me show you that. For that, and to see what features are available from Quarkus, we just have to run npm Quarkus list extensions. Then it takes a few seconds, and it shows us a list of all of the extensions that we can use from Quarkus. Some of them are the ones that implement the various features from MicroProfile. And it also includes a lot of other libraries that are very useful. In this demo, we are going to be using just a few of them. So if we want to add those features to our application, we just do Maven Quarkus add extension. And then we are going to pass in a list of the features we want. In this case, it'll be Quarkus REST Easy, JSONB. We are going to add Quarkus REST Client, and we are going to add Quarkus small r fault tolerance. Now, those three are for the implementations of MicroProfile that are JSONB, REST Client, and fault tolerance. And boom, it added the three features. What happened to our POM file, if we go and take a look, we see that it added those extensions besides REST Easy, which we already had, fault tolerance, JSONB, and REST Client. Now, because we are using the 1.3.0 final version of MicroProfile, for Quarkus, which was available from the starter, these versions are not compatible. So the only thing we have to do is remove those versions and allow it to resolve by itself and not cause any conflicts with that version. So I'm going to save that and then re-import all of our dependencies. All right, and then after that, let's say we wanted to use configuration. In the past, we would do a lot of things, very cumbersome. Or you would use a framework like Spring that has a lot of submodules that allow you to build configuration very easily and set it up in your application. MicroProfile offers that as well, and we are going to see an example of that. So let's say that instead of hello, I want to take that salutation from a property file. The config implementation from MicroProfile allows you to inject properties from various sources. One of them could be a system variable, the other one could be an environment variable, or it could be a properties file. And it also allows you to define your own sources for configuration. So let's say you wanted to have a separate server to have all of your properties for your various environments. Then you could define your own source and then hit that server, retrieve the properties you need, and inject them into your application. For now, we are going to look just at the injection of properties from a properties file. So if we go to resources and then application properties, we can see that we have key value pairs of properties. In this case, let's say we are going to define salutation, and it's going to be hola, which is hello in Spanish. The way we would go about injecting that property into our application is very simple. We have two APIs. One of them could be using a config object, which is provided by MicroProfile. Let's make it private. And we can see here that we need to choose the one coming from MicroProfile. And there's our config, object. Now, let's say we are going to pass in here the value of that property. The way we would do it is just by calling config.getValue, and then we pass in the name of our property. And we also need to pass in what type that property is. All right, so that would, this config object would retrieve the salutation value as a string from our properties file. It will look in all of those sources, right? It'll look in the system variables, in the environment, and in the properties file, and wherever it finds it, it'll pull it from there. In this case, we only have it defined in the properties file. So I changed that, and we can go back to our terminal, and then let's run it again. Quarkus dev to put it in development mode. It takes a few seconds, and our application is up and running again. Now, notice we now have all the extensions we added for JSONB, for fault tolerance, and REST client. Okay, so let's go back to our browser, and let's see if instead of hello, it now says hola. And yes, it read the value from the property and put it there. The other way of reading properties is through the config property annotation. So let's say instead of the config object, I wanted to use the config property annotation. I would do so by injecting it in this property. And then instead of using the config get value, I would just do salutation. And since we are running in development mode, that change already took place, restarted the server, we refresh, and it's still the same. Now, what happened here is an error. And the reason is no config value of type string exists for that salutation. And that was not expected. So let's see if okay. So the reason is only I forgot to put, obviously, the name of my property, right? Yes. So when we define the add config property, we need to specify, obviously, which property we're trying to read and inject it in this property. So, okay, let's save it. Refresh. And there it is. Hola. All right, so those are two of the ways you can read properties. And then let's move on to the next feature, which would be, let's say we wanted to have a user service for register users. And the way we would go about that is simply by creating a new users resource. This will be our controller to manage everything that's relating to users. So let's say we define the path as users. And then we would define our get method, public resource or response, and then we make it get users and this is showing you how the JAX-RS works in MicroProfile, and it is exactly the same as in Jakarta EE. You just define your HTTP verb, your method, and then you do, let's say we're going to have some users. So let's create a Pojo with just first, last, and email. This is our user Pojo. We will have first name, last name, and the email. And then we would define the getters and setters. And then here in our REST endpoint for users, we would just, normally this would come from a database or some other storage, but in this case, I'm going to manually create a user and then set first, last, and email. Not get, set. All right, and then we would return that. Let's say we would return a list of users. So for that, it would be let's say collections, singleton list of users, and then we return our response as OK, passing in the users, and then we build our response. Now, everything is happening here with the response comes from the JAX-B feature from MicroProfile, which basically is it automatically will grab this list of users, list of objects, and it'll convert them into JSON, and then it'll send that back as a JSON. So we don't have to do anything extra. This is very similar to how Spring works, for example. But then we have to define our produces, which is the media type that we are going to return, which in this case will be application JSON. So let's say we hit the user's endpoint, we should expect a JSON list with this user. So let's save that. Let's go to our browser. And then now, instead of hitting hello, let's hit users. And we get the list of users, position 0 has my object. So that was very simple. And please notice here, we are not running this on top of a application server per se. We are only using the libraries that are pertinent for this use case, which is in this case provided by Quarkus. So it's very lightweight. And we have the same APIs or similar APIs that gives us productivity and gives us a lot better developer experience. Okay, so that's our get. But normally, we don't write business logic inside these controllers. So what we can do is extract this into a service. And we probably can create a users service or user service class, and then inject it into our controller. So here's our service, and let's make it singleton. And what this will do is it'll have a public get the users method, which will return a list of users. And obviously, all the code we were doing in our controller will now happen in our service class. So let's go back to our resource, and all of this, except for the response, all of this would happen in our service class. And from our resource, all we would have to do is call our service And of course, we need to inject it into our resource by using CDI, context and dependency injection from JAX-RS. And for doing that, we just have to either we could inject it with the inject annotation, or the other way, we could inject components through constructor injection as well. So let's say we have a user's resource constructor, and we specify here that we are going to receive a user service. The local instance needs to be defined. And then we just do user service. This user service equals user service. And that's how we can also inject using dependency injection in JAX-RS or in MicroProfile. So now we can just use our service here, user service, and then get users, and it should accomplish the exact same thing. So let's go back to our browser, make sure that it still works. Yep. Now, JAX-B also works the other way. It's not only when we are returning a response from our service, but if we have a post, let's say we want to save users and have an endpoint for that, we can also use JAX-B to transform the JSON that comes in the request into an object of our choose automatically by using JSON-B. So how would we do that? And let's first create our service method for that. Let's say we just are going to return a message saying we saved the user. We receive a user here. And then we return, actually, let's do string format to give back the name of the user that was saved by extracting it from the actual object. And for that, saved user, get first name, user, get last name. And then from our resource, all we have to do is define our post endpoint. This is also analogous to the post mapping from Spring. And it'll consumes media type application JSON. In this case, it's consumes instead of produces because we are accepting JSON in the request. Public, just a string as a response, and then save user. All we have to do is define our parameter there, and then return user service, save user, we pass in the user, and that's all we have to do. Now, we need to send a JSON with a user information, right? With some user information in order to call this. So for that, I'm going to use Postman. And I have defined here the create user with a body, which contains the fields that we need in our object. First name, my last name, and my email. And then it's a post. And something important here is that we need to define the content type as application JSON. So we send that in, and we should expect the message we put in our service. User Arturo Parra saved. So as you can see, developing with JAX-RS and JAX-B with MicroProfile is very simple, and it's very similar to other frameworks. So with the difference, we are not running on top of a framework. We are just running on top of the platform itself, which is MicroProfile in this case. And even better here with Quarkus, because we are not running on the whole MicroProfile platform, just on the features that we actually need in our application. Okay, so now we have a get, we have a post, and we know how to use configuration. But what if, let's say, we wanted to call a different service? We wanted to retrieve some information from another microservice, and we would have to create a REST client, hit that endpoint, and then retrieve the information we need, and then display it here. So for that, let's say we don't want the salutation to come from a properties file. We want that salutation to come from a different microservice. And as it turns out, I do have prepared a hello service that is already running in my local as well, but it's running on a different port. It's running on 8081 and /hello. And this, what it does is it returns a message that says hello from remote service. So if I want to call this microservice from my other service, from my hello controller here, from my demo application, I would need a REST client. And REST client is one of the other features that MicroProfile comes with, and we can create one very easily. Let's do that. All we have to do is we need to define an interface. And it has, let's call it hello service. Now that interface needs to be registered as a REST client. And then we would define, later we will see why we need a config key here. It's kind of a tag that we put on our REST client. Let's say with the name hello-service. And this is our service. This will automatically tell MicroProfile to create an implementation of a REST client. And then with that, we should be able to just use it. We would inject that hello service into our controller. Or even better, why don't we, inside our user's resource, now let's inject it here, just because we're running out of time. Okay, so let's inject our REST client. And for that, we only have to do REST client, and then our hello service. And with that, we injected the REST client into our controller, hello controller. And instead, the salutation, instead of coming from the properties file, we are going to retrieve it from the hello service. And we are going to define the API for that. And it's only going to be, let's call it salute. It'll return a string. It'll be called salute. And from here, we will just call it hello service salute. And that will be replaced in our first placeholder. And the name that we pass in the parameter will still be in this message. Now, how does the REST client, what endpoint to call, what microservice it will call? That's also very easily defined. And for that, we use our application properties again. And we define our tag here, our hello service. And then this is convention, microprofile REST. That will tell Quarkus that this is a REST client that's defined in our application. And then this will be the URL that it needs to hit. In this case, it is HTTP localhost 8081, and then hello. We also can define here what's the scope of our REST client. So let's make it singleton. Scope equals, it'll be a singleton. Okay, so remember, what we should expect here now when we call that endpoint should be hello from remote service, comma, and then whatever name I passed in. It is running. So let's go to our web browser. And then let's hit our hello. And then the resource was not found. Okay, because I need to pass in the parameter with my name, of course. We don't have an endpoint that does not accept a parameter. Oops. Salute. Let's see what's going on here. From our hello controller, we are calling salute. And then we have salute.
I think you're missing a forward slash in the mapping.
Maybe, okay.
On your method.
All right. In my method. Is that how I have it defined here? Let's see. Yeah, it's only hello here. The hello service is well defined. says it cannot find. It couldn't find a method for. Let me real quick look at my other project here. Of course, that's the issue. If I don't define the actual HTTP verb, it doesn't work. This is supposed to be a get. All right. Let's see if refreshing works. And yes, sorry for that, guys. It was a very, very simple thing. Okay, so we can see that we are actually hitting the remote service. We are grabbing the message from there, hello from remote service, and Arturo as we pass it here. Now, that's all good and nice, but what if the other service is down? Let's see what would happen. Let's go to where I'm running the other service, and let's take it down. What would happen to our own application with that other service down? Let's refresh. And obviously we see an error, and it says that connection refused. That's why we could implement some sort of fault tolerance. And for that, MicroProfile offers a feature for fault tolerance. And it's very simple to use, as everything with MicroProfile. We are going to do it really quickly here. Since we know here we are calling an external system, let's do some fallback. And then fallback method, and then alternate salutation, let's call it. So we are telling if when you call this external service something fails, we have a fallback. We have some fault tolerance here. Don't panic, just call this other alternate salutation method. So we just define it here, alternate salutation, and then we pass in whatever parameter we're passing in the original method, and then we return a default method. Default message. Return, local message. Let's say sorry, and then let's format it. Here is sorry, somebody. Local message instead, sad face. With the fault tolerance in place, our application won't crash. It has an alternate solution in those cases, in those use cases. So we just replace the name there. And let's see what happens now with the service down. Sorry, Arturo, local message instead. So that's how we implement fault tolerance. And there's many other features that MicroProfile comes with to work in the cloud natively. But for this demo, I think we should be complete.
Awesome. Let me switch back the screen. Okay. I think we have a question, the queue, Abel.
Yeah. Yeah, I think Eden was asking Arturo, microprofile do runtime or compile time validation for properties? I think you basically show that, but if you can answer that question, would be great.
Well, it's actually runtime. If you change something and the the actual property is not there, it won't detect it and it will fail. So you need to have in place, let's say you have different environments for testing and then for production, and you need to make sure you have all your properties defined in each environment externally, right?
Okay. And I actually had another question. So the way how you see it, with all the benefits and the advantages that microprofile gives you, do you think that it could be considered like the next iteration for a Spring Boot framework, or how do you see microprofile fitting in the
It,
technology?
it's it's easy to fall into that train of thought, right? But I think like it's just another option, and it all depends on how many things do you need. Spring is a very mature and very great framework for many things. It has lots and lots of modules. So microprofile is just specifically targeting microservices, right? It doesn't come with all of the Spring framework modules. Like it doesn't have anything for batch. It doesn't have anything for many other modules, right? It's only targeting microservices, so to speak. So I see them side by side coexisting, and it's just another option, right? You can resort on it if your use case requires it.
Yeah. Right.
What are your thoughts on? So there are many implementations for the spec. So what are your thoughts about? Well, if that's a good thing having so many, and if you had to pick one, just your personal opinion, which one would you pick if you had the option right now to start a project from scratch?
I have played with 3 of them. I played, for example, with Payara Micro. I played with Helidon, which is the one from Oracle, by the way. But Helidon is in the category of assemblers, the same way Quark is. So if I had to choose one, I would go with an assembler instead of a full-fledged application server, because it has a lot of optimizations, and you can just choose 2 or 3 libraries or features that you actually need in your application, and you will end up with a very small deliverable, which it's important, especially if you, let's say you want to run a Lambda, right, in AWS. It needs to start really quick. So this type of platforms, Quarkus and Helidon, would be my choice, because obviously they optimize all your deliverables inside one single package. And then it also depends on your use case. The others, like Payara, are more traditional type of application servers. So they provide you with all the features that come with MicroProfile, if that's what you need in your application, right? But personal opinion, I would go with Quarkus, because it also has this development mode that I love, and for its optimizations and all of the libraries available in it.
Cool. So, Abel, why don't you go ahead with the raffle? And if anyone has any other questions, just feel free to send it over on the live chat, and we'll get them answered while we do this.
Actually, before moving on, we have another question from Brian. So we actually have another question from Brian Harris. The question is, will there be any use cases to use MicroProfile and a Spring together?
Yes, I don't see why not. Like I was explaining, probably you're not only building something for let's say having something for configuration very handy, but you also need something for batch or whatever. Then you could combine some modules from Spring and from MicroProfile. Yeah, they could work together. Yeah.
Awesome. So we will explain the mechanics. I mean, if you have any questions, please post them in the YouTube stream chat. We will. First of all, I hope you guys are doing well in this special situation where we all have to stay at home. Thanks, Arturo, for the presentation. It was great to know more about MicroProfile and how, I mean, I was really interested in knowing more about the evolution of how this like MicroProfile, Quarkus, and all these things came up. So it's great to know more details about that, and also the demo was really cool. So if you can just post them in the chat. The way how we're gonna raffle the thing is, Arturo, you should ask a question, pretty basic question about the presentation that you just gave, and the first one to answer the question in the YouTube stream is the one who gets the license. I think that's kind of fair.
Okay, yeah. One question would be, what annotation do you use for defining a REST client?
All right, that's a good question. I will wait a few seconds because we know that the YouTube streaming has a delay, but Talib has another question. He wants to know, where have you seen the biggest wins using MicroProfile?
Can you repeat the question, Ergo?
Where have you seen the biggest wins using MicroProfile?
You're cutting, so.
Yeah, the question is, where have you seen the biggest wins using MicroProfile?
Okay, well, the efficiency and the lightweight applications you can come up with. Nowadays, especially with the cloud environment, you need your applications or your microservices to start really quickly without all the boilerplate things that happen with a normal application server for JEE. Efficiency and lightweight applications.
All right, cool. Eden already sent some sort of response in the chat, but I don't think that's super accurate. So let's see if someone else gets the actual answer. Also, if you have any other questions, please post them. The other thing that I wanted to mention is we are always looking for speakers, guys. So if you want to, I mean, if it's your first time, it's not a problem. You can actually prepare a presentation and share with the community. At the end of the day, it's all about sharing what we know, what we use, the things that we like, and I know that sometimes we probably don't find the time, but it's really cool because I feel like one of the best ways to learn something is when you share that knowledge with someone else. So if you have something, please let us know. Info@cltjug.org. It's the email address, or you can reach out to any of us as well.
Yeah, you can find the contact details in the website at the bottom of the screen, cltjug.org. But yeah, like Avel was saying, I mean, there's always a story to tell. Whatever you're doing, I mean, you might be using some piece of technology that you want to share. with. I mean, in a special way. We all do different things at work. Yeah, and I saw a lot of people joining our Slack group. Feel free to join, and we can keep in touch there in this, especially in this particular time. So let's use that to bring the community together. And please give us your suggestions, your feedback, and any type of help you want to provide. Let us know.
So Arturo, question. So Bamsi said the annotation is @path. Is that right?
No, that's not correct.
Okay. Talib said he provided two answers: @get and @post.
No, like probably they are understanding the question incorrectly. I'm asking, what annotation do you use to define a REST client, not to define an endpoint or a REST service?
So for the people still in the streaming, if you have the answer for that, please. So it says @REST client. Arturo?
You cut.
Talib has provided another answer is @REST client. Is that
Right?
right?
Yeah, that's one of the annotations. There's two actually that you need to use to define it. Yeah.
Hold on, but Ethan mentioned that was the first answer.
But it said blah 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 REST client. It could be a registered REST client.
Yes, that's more accurate.
Okay, so
there's two of them, right? Because to actually define it, you use the registered REST client, but to inject it into other components, you use REST client.
Okay. So I guess it's fair that Ethan got it first, right? I mean,
yep.
Looks like that. That's yeah, it's fair to say REST client at register REST client. Okay, sounds good. So I think Ethan is the winner tonight. Yep. Well, I just want to thank you guys for joining. Orlando, do you have any closing words for the group?
No. Thanks Arturo for the talk. Thanks everyone that joined the live stream. This will become available immediately for replays, and so you can share it with your friends. Subscribe to the channel so you get up-to-date updates. Join the Slack group, and well, we'll see each other again probably soon. This was fun.
Yeah, Ethan, we will reach out to you to send you the license via email. Thank you so much, guys, and stay safe.
I don't think we actually have his email. So if you can send us an email to info@cltjog.org, I'll put it on the chat, and you can send us we'll have your email that way.
All right. Well, then thank you guys again. Try to stay safe, and we will announce the event next month. So you can join us again. I hope we can start getting more people in these events. Thank you so much, and we'll talk later.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.